You don't belong here. He poured a full glass of bourbon over the man's head. Slow, deliberate. Every drop a statement while the bar watched in silence. Phones lifted. No one moved. Someone laughed. No one knew the quiet man in the wet shirt had approved every liquor license in the city for the past 11 years. The bar was called Meridian. It had been there for 30 years, tucked between a dry cleaner and a shuttered pharmacy on Clement Street. Dark wood, low light, the kind of place where regulars had their own glasses. Marcus Dillard had been coming here since he was 26. He sat at the far end of the counter, second stool from the wall, same spot every Thursday. He had a glass of rye in front of him and a folded newspaper he hadn't opened yet. The bartender, an older woman named Connie, had already refilled his water without being asked. The door opened at 9:14 p.m. 3 men walked in. Not together in the way friends walk in, together in the way that said they'd done this before. The one in front was broad, thick through the shoulders, wearing a jacket that didn't quite hide the shape of what was clipped to his belt. He scanned the room the way some men do, not looking for a seat, looking to confirm something. His name was Callahan. Marcus didn't know that yet. Callahan moved through the bar slowly. His 2 companions stayed near the door, not sitting, just standing there with drinks they ordered but didn't touch. The room didn't stop. Music still played. Conversations continued. But something shifted. The way a room shifts when the temperature drops 2 degrees, and no one can say exactly when it happened. Callahan stopped behind Marcus. He didn't say anything for a moment. He just stood there, close enough that Marcus could hear him breathing, close enough that Connie, wiping down the far end of the counter, looked up and then looked away. "You're in my seat." Marcus didn't turn around. He picked up his glass, took a slow sip, set it back down. The wood made a small sound when it landed. That was the only sound in that part of the bar. "There's no name on it," Marcus said. Callahan laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was the kind of laugh that's meant to be heard by everyone else in the room. An announcement. He looked back at his 2 companions, and they smiled on cue, like men who had practiced this. "New rule," Callahan said. He pulled out the stool next to Marcus and sat down sideways, facing him. "Thursdays are for regulars. I've been coming here since 1994. Marcus said. His voice was flat, not angry, just flat. Connie had stopped moving. She was holding a glass and not drying it. 2 men at a table near the window had gone quiet. A woman on the other side of the bar had her phone in her hand, not raised yet, just in her hand. Callahan reached over. He picked up Marcus's glass of rye, held it for a second. Then he poured it slowly, deliberately, over the top of Marcus's head. The liquid ran down his forehead, along the side of his face, soaked into the collar of his shirt. It smelled sharp and warm. A few drops fell onto the folded newspaper. No one said anything. Callahan set the empty glass down gently, like he was being careful not to break it. Marcus didn't move. He sat with his hands flat on the counter, eyes forward, bourbon dripping from his jaw onto the bar top. The room was so quiet that the ice settling in someone's glass across the room sounded loud. Someone, somewhere near the back, let out a short breath that might have been a laugh. 10 seconds passed. Callahan waited for something. A reaction, an outburst, an excuse to escalate. Marcus gave him nothing. Connie finally put the glass down. She walked to the register and started doing something with the receipts, not looking up. The 2 men at the window table went back to their conversation. Quieter now. The woman with the phone slid it back into her pocket. Marcus reached forward and picked up his folded newspaper. He placed it to the side, away from the wet spot on the counter. Smoothed the edge with 2 fingers. Unhurried. It was such a small thing. Such a precise, unhurried thing. And for just a moment, Callahan's smile didn't quite hold. Callahan ordered a bourbon. The good kind. He said the name of it loud enough for the room to hear, then tapped the bar twice with 2 fingers like he was signing something. Connie poured it without making eye contact. She set it down and moved to the other end of the counter. He drank slowly, facing forward now, like Marcus was no longer worth the angle. His 2 companions had taken stools nearby, close enough to be a presence, far enough to give him room. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. Their job was just to be there, and they were doing it well. Marcus hadn't moved. His shirt was still wet. The bourbon had soaked through to his undershirt, and he could feel the cold of it against his ribs. He kept his hands on the counter. He did not ask Connie for a towel. He did not look at Callahan. He looked at the space above the bottles on the back wall, where the light was dim and even, and he breathed slowly. Callahan glanced at him once, then looked away. That glance lasted less than a second, but it carried a full sentence inside it. It said, "You're still here, which means you've accepted it." It said, "This is how this works." It said, "I've done this before and nothing happened, and nothing will happen now." There was no anger in it. That was the part that was hardest to sit with. It wasn't personal, it was procedural. One of the companions, the shorter one with a thin mustache, leaned over and said something close to Callahan's ear. Callahan smiled. Not big, just enough. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather case, the kind that held a badge and an ID card. He set it on the bar in front of him. Not open, just placed there, flat, visible, like a paperweight, like a reminder. Nobody looked at it directly, but everybody saw it. That was the point. Connie came back around to refill the water glasses at the end of the counter. She moved efficiently, professionally, the way someone moves when they are pretending a situation is normal. She refreshed the glass of a man 2 stools down. She did not come toward Marcus. She turned and went back to the register. Marcus noticed. He noticed the specific geography of it, the way the space around him had quietly been reorganized, not through any announcement, not through force, just through the presence of that leather case on the bar, through the positioning of 3 bodies, through the small social decisions that people make when they calculate risk and decide someone else's problem isn't worth their evening. The room had made its choice. It had made it quickly and without discussion. The way rooms always do. A man near the back paid his tab and left. The 2 at the window table asked for their check. Not rushed, just done for the night. Suddenly, the woman who had put her phone away earlier now had her coat on her lap, one by one, like a tide going out. The room was quietly reorganizing itself around the new center of gravity. Callahan was the center. He hadn't raised his voice once. He picked up his badge case, slid it back into his jacket, and buttoned 1 button. A small gesture of finality. Then he turned his head, just slightly, toward Marcus. Not a full look, more like an acknowledgement. The kind you give something you've already decided doesn't require more of your attention. "You should probably head home," he said, calm, almost helpful. "It's getting late." Marcus said nothing. The silence stretched. Callahan let it. He was comfortable in silence the way men are comfortable in silence when they believe the silence is working for them. He picked up his glass, took a long sip, set it back down. His 2 companions watched Marcus with the particular blankness of men who had been trained to show nothing. The bartender was doing something with a clipboard near the register. The remaining customers were looking at their phones, at their drinks, at the middle distance. No one was looking at Marcus. Not directly, but they were all aware of him. The way you are aware of something that is about to tip over, and you have already decided you will not be the one to catch it. Marcus slowly reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a phone, set it on the counter face down, said nothing. Did not look at Callahan. Just placed it there, quietly. The way Callahan had placed his badge, flat, visible. It was such a small gesture. It should have meant nothing. But Callahan's jaw tightened, just once, just slightly, and then he looked away. The phone sat on the counter between them. Face down, black. It was a small rectangle of nothing. And yet Callahan had not stopped being aware of it since Marcus set it there. He picked up his drink. He put it down. He said something to the companion on his left, and the companion nodded. But Callahan's eyes moved back to the phone before the nod was finished. Marcus had not touched it again. He sat with the same posture he'd had since Callahan walked in. Back straight, hands loose, the wet shirt had started to dry at the edges, leaving a faint watermark along his collar. He looked like a man waiting for a bus, comfortable with the wait, not watching the clock. Callahan shifted on his stool. It was a small shift, a repositioning. The kind of movement that means nothing on its own but means something when it comes from a man who, 20 minutes ago, had been completely still. He set his glass down with slightly more force than before. Not a slam, just a degree more than necessary. The companion with the mustache noticed. He looked at Callahan, and then looked at Marcus, and then looked at his own drink. "I told you to go home," Callahan said. "You did," Marcus said. That was all. 2 words. Flat and even, like he was confirming the time of day. He didn't turn to look at Callahan when he said it. He kept his eyes on the middle distance, on that same dim space above the bottles. And he breathed. And he waited. The silence after those 2 words was different from the silence before them. Before, the silence had been Callahan's. It had belonged to him, working for him, filling the room with the weight of his authority. Now the silence had moved. It sat closer to Marcus, and it had a different texture. It wasn't empty. It was full of something that nobody in the room could name, but everybody could feel pressing lightly against their chest. Connie put down her clipboard. She walked to the near end of the counter, the end she had been avoiding, and she picked up a clean towel. She set it on the bar in front of Marcus without a word. She did not look at Callahan. She did not look at Marcus. She set the towel down the way you set something down when you have made a small private decision. And then she walked back to the register. Callahan watched her do it. His expression didn't change. But his right hand moved to the edge of the bar and rested there. Fingers spread. And he looked at the towel for a moment with the specific attention of a man recalculating something. The companion on his right had straightened slightly. The one with the mustache had gone very still. The 3 of them held a shape that had quietly shifted from dominant to uncertain, and no one had raised a voice to make it happen. Marcus picked up the towel. He touched it to the side of his face once, folded it, set it aside. Then he reached into his jacket, slowly, with no urgency, and pulled out a small notebook, the kind with a dark cover and a thin elastic band. He set it on the counter next to the phone. He did not open it. He did not write anything. He just placed it there, the way you place something you have been carrying for a long time and are finally setting down in the right spot. Someone near the back of the bar coughed. Callahan leaned forward slightly. "What is that?" he said. Not a question. The inflection was flat, like a statement that wanted to be a question but didn't want to give Marcus the satisfaction of answering one. Marcus looked at the notebook. Then he looked at Callahan for the first time since the bourbon. It was a direct look, not hard, not soft, just clear. The kind of look that doesn't need anything behind it because it carries its own weight already. "A notebook," Marcus said. Callahan stared at him. 3 seconds. 4. His fingers pressed into the edge of the bar. The room had gone so quiet that the hum of the refrigeration unit behind the counter was audible. A low, steady sound that had always been there, and now suddenly seemed very loud. Then Marcus looked away. Back to the bottles. Back to the dim, even light above them. He placed one hand flat on the notebook cover, not gripping it, just resting there. Patient, unhurried, like a man who had already decided how the night was going to end and was simply waiting for everyone else to catch up. Callahan stood up. Callahan stood for a moment without doing anything. He was a big man, and standing made him bigger, filled more of the space between the stools and the counter. He looked down at Marcus the way men look down at things they have decided to move. Then he reached out and put his hand on Marcus's shoulder. It wasn't a grab. Not yet. It was a placement, deliberate and slow. Fingers spread, palm flat. The universal language of a man who wants you to understand that he can touch you whenever he wants, and there is nothing you can do about it. Marcus looked at the hand. Not at Callahan. At the hand. "Don't," Marcus said. One word, the same flat tone as everything else, but something in the room responded to it. The woman with the coat on her lap looked up. Connie stopped moving behind the counter. Even the refrigeration unit seemed to pause, though that was impossible. The mind-filling silence with more silence. Callahan pushed him. Not hard. A single push to the shoulder, the kind designed to produce a reaction, to get the other person moving, emotionally or physically, to break the stillness that had been making him uncomfortable for the last 20 minutes. Marcus moved with it slightly, absorbed it, and then was still again. Callahan pushed him a second time. Harder. Marcus put his right hand up, palm out, a clear gesture, simple and direct. Stop. It was not aggressive. It was not a threat. It was a boundary drawn in the air between two people, and it was so clean and deliberate that one of the companions took a half step back without seeming to realize he had done it. But Callahan reached out a third time, this time gripping the front of Marcus's jacket, and that was when Marcus's hand came off the counter. It was fast, not explosive, not wild. Fast in the way that precision is fast, the way a thing moves when it has been practiced until it no longer requires thought. His left hand came up inside Callahan's grip and broke it at the wrist, and his right hand was already at Callahan's forearm, and the leverage was simple and immediate. Callahan's balance shifted before he understood what was happening. And then he was sitting back down on his stool, hard, with Marcus's hand no longer on him at all. 3 seconds. Maybe less. Marcus placed both hands flat on the counter again. The companion with the mustache had his hand inside his jacket. He had not moved further than that. He was looking at Callahan, waiting for a signal. And Callahan was looking at his own wrist with an expression that was working very hard to stay neutral. The other companion had his phone out, not raised, just out. Connie was standing completely still with both hands on the edge of the sink. Nobody spoke for a long moment. Then the woman with the coat stood up quietly, laid 2 folded bills on her table without counting them, and walked to the door. She moved carefully, the way people move when they don't want to draw attention to the fact that they are leaving. The door opened and closed behind her. The room felt smaller after she was gone. Callahan straightened on the stool. He adjusted his jacket. He was doing the work of reassembling something, and everyone could see it, and everyone pretended not to. He looked at Marcus with a new quality of attention, the kind that comes after a miscalculation, sharper and less certain than what had been there before. His eyes moved to the notebook on the counter. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at the phone beside it. Then back at Marcus. Something was moving behind his expression. Something he was trying to identify without wanting to ask about directly. He reached out slowly and touched the edge of the notebook with one finger. Not opening it, just touching the corner. "Who do you work for?" he said. It came out quieter than he intended, less like a demand and more like a question he hadn't planned on asking. The companion with the mustache heard it and looked at Marcus for the first time with something other than blankness. The refrigeration unit hummed. The ice shifted in someone's forgotten glass. Marcus looked at the notebook, then at Callahan. Then he picked up the notebook, slid the elastic band back into place, and put it in his jacket pocket. He did it slowly, without answer, without expression, and somehow that was worse than anything he could have said. Callahan stood up again. This time it was different. The first time he stood, it was performance. This time it was decision. He came off the stool with his full weight behind him and closed the distance between himself and Marcus in 2 steps. And his right hand came up fast, aimed at the side of Marcus's head. Marcus was already moving. He came off the stool low and to the left, inside the arc of the swing, and his right forearm came up to redirect the force rather than absorb it. Callahan's arm went wide, his momentum carried him forward, and Marcus used that, one hand at the elbow, one at the shoulder, and the geometry of it was simple and final. Callahan went down. Not a fall, a placement. He was put on the floor with the kind of efficiency that doesn't require anger, that actually requires the absence of anger, the way a door is closed by someone who knows exactly how much force a door needs. He hit the floor and stayed there for a moment, recalibrating. Marcus stood over him for exactly 1 second. Then he stepped back. 1 full step, both hands open at his sides. He was not standing over Callahan anymore. He was simply standing, in the bar, with his hands open, and he was breathing at the same rate he had been breathing all evening. The room was silent. Then someone clapped. It was a single clap, from the back, from a man in a gray jacket who had been sitting alone with a beer for the last hour and had not spoken to anyone. He brought his hands together once, deliberately, and the sound of it in the silence was very loud. Then someone else joined, not enthusiastic, not a celebration, more like an acknowledgement. The sound of people who had been watching something for a long time and had finally seen what they already knew was true, confirmed in front of them. Connie put both palms flat on the counter and exhaled. Callahan's 2 companions had not moved. The one with the mustache still had his hand near his jacket, but had not gone further. He was looking at Callahan on the floor, and then at Marcus standing with open hands, and he was doing arithmetic. The kind of arithmetic you do when the variables have suddenly changed. The other companion had his phone fully out now, and he was looking at the screen, not at the room, and whatever he was reading had made his face go carefully blank. Callahan got up. He did it slowly, without help, without looking at Marcus. He straightened his jacket. He touched the side of his face where the floor had met it. There was no blood. There didn't need to be. The damage was somewhere else entirely, in the specific quality of the silence that was now surrounding him rather than working for him. He looked at Marcus. Marcus looked back. Same clear eyes, same even breathing. He had not changed. That was the thing that was hardest to process. The man who had been sitting quietly with bourbon in his hair an hour ago was identical to the man standing now. Same posture, same hands, same expression that was not quite neutral because neutral implies the absence of something. And this was not absence. This was presence, controlled, deliberate, total presence. "You just assaulted a police officer," Callahan said. His voice was steady, professional. He had found the ground under his feet again and was standing on it. But the words landed differently than they would have 30 minutes ago. The room heard them differently. The man in the gray jacket had stopped clapping, but was still watching with his arms folded. And his expression said that he had heard that sentence, and had filed it next to everything else he had seen tonight, and had formed a view. Connie spoke. Her voice was quiet, but it carried. "I saw him push first," she said. 3 times. She wasn't looking at Callahan when she said it. She was looking at the towel she was folding it with great attention, as if the folding required everything she had. But the words were in the room now, and they didn't leave. The companion with the phone looked up. He said something close to Callahan's ear, very low, and Callahan's jaw moved. He looked at his companion, and then looked at Marcus, and then looked at the phone screen that was being held toward him. Whatever was on it. He looked at it for 3 seconds, and then looked away, and did not look at it again. Marcus reached into his pocket. He set a $20 bill on the counter beside his untouched glass. He picked up his phone. He did not pick up the notebook because the notebook was already in his jacket, had been since Chapter 4, and he had not forgotten it was there. He looked at Callahan one final time. Not long. Just enough. Then he walked toward the door, unhurried. The room watched him go the way a room watches something it will be thinking about for a long time. The door opened. The night air came in briefly, cool and dark. Then the door closed behind him, and nobody in the bar said a single word for almost a full minute. The video went up at 11:47 p.m., 17 seconds. It started with Marcus's hand coming up and Callahan going down, and it ended with the door closing. No sound, no context, no bourbon dripping down a man's face, no 3 pushes, no leather badge case placed on the bar like a paperweight, just 17 seconds of a large black man putting a white man on the floor of a bar. By midnight, it had 4,000 views. By 1 a.m., someone had added text over it. White letters on black. Unprovoked attack on off-duty officer. The font was clean and simple. The kind of font that looks like a news chyron. The kind that makes a sentence feel like a fact. It was shared from an account with no profile picture and 11 followers. Within 40 minutes, that account had been retweeted by 3 accounts with significantly more. Nobody could trace who ran those 3 accounts. Nobody tried very hard. At 2:15 a.m., a man named Deputy Chief Roland Hess was awake in his kitchen with a cup of coffee he hadn't touched and a phone he hadn't put down. He was 61 years old and had been with the department for 34 years, and he understood certain things about how situations moved the way a weatherman understands pressure systems. He could feel this one building from the moment his phone rang the first time at 11:52 p.m. He had listened. He had asked 2 questions. Then he had hung up and made a different call. The second call lasted 9 minutes. By 3 a.m., there was a report filed. It described the incident at Meridian Bar as an unprovoked physical assault on Officer Dennis Callahan, off-duty, resulting in injury. The language was precise and passive, the kind of language that had been used in reports for decades, worn smooth by use, each word chosen not for accuracy but for durability. The report did not mention bourbon. It did not mention a badge placed on a bar. It did not mention 3 pushes or a towel set down by a bartender who had seen enough. It mentioned a victim. It mentioned a suspect. It assigned those words to specific people. At 6:30 a.m., the local news ran a segment. 40 seconds. They used the 17-second clip, slowed slightly, and an anchor with careful eyes read from a screen in front of her. She said the words off-duty officer and sustained injuries and suspect identified in that order. And then the segment moved on to weather. The clip played again at 7 a.m. and at 8 a.m., and each time it played it became slightly more familiar, slightly more settled into the category of things that had already been decided. Familiarity is its own kind of proof. Marcus was at his kitchen table at 7:45 a.m. when his phone began to move. Not one call. A sequence. First, his neighbor Raymond, who had seen something on the news and was asking if Marcus was all right with the careful tone of someone who is not sure what they saw means what they think it means. Then a woman from his church. Then a number he didn't recognize that left no message. Then Tyler, his youngest, calling from across town with a voice that was working hard to stay even. "They're saying you attacked somebody," Tyler said. "I know what they're saying," Marcus said. He was looking at his kitchen window. The morning light was coming in flat and gray. His coffee was getting cold. On the table in front of him was the dark notebook, open now for the first time, and he was writing something in it with a pen that moved slowly and deliberately. The same way everything about him moved. He did not explain to Tyler what he was writing. He did not explain anything yet. "Dad," Tyler said. "They know your name. They know where the community center is." Marcus stopped writing. He looked at the window for a moment. Then he looked back at the notebook, at what he had written, and he drew a slow line under it. One line, straight and final. "Then we don't have much time," he said. He closed the notebook. He put the pen down parallel to it. "Precisely. The way you place things when order is the only thing you have left to control." Outside. A car slowed in front of the house, and then continued on. It might have been nothing. It might have been someone checking an address. Marcus listened to it go and did not move until the sound had faded completely down the street. Then he picked up his phone and made a call. By 9 a.m., the clip had been seen by 200,000 people. By 10 a.m., it was 250,000. The numbers moved the way fire moves through dry grass, not because anyone was pushing it, but because the conditions were right and the material was there. Comments accumulated in columns beneath it. Most of them had already decided. Most of them had decided within the first 4 seconds of watching. The story had a shape now. Shapes are hard to change once they settle. A councilwoman named Patricia Okafor saw it on her tablet while she was being driven to a breakfast meeting. She watched it twice. She asked her assistant to find out who Marcus Dillard was. Her assistant came back 12 minutes later with a name, an address, a history, and a connection to a community center on Delancey Street that had received a city grant 18 months ago. The councilwoman looked at that last piece of information for a long time. Then she told her assistant to hold her calls until noon. She did not say why. She didn't need to. On Delancey Street, the community center opened at 8, as it always did. A woman named Gloria, who had run the front desk for 11 years, unlocked the door and turned on the lights and started the coffee maker. By 9:15, she had received 4 phone calls. 2 were from parents asking if after-school programming was still running. 1 was from a reporter who wanted a comment. The 4th was from a man who didn't give his name and said only that the center should think carefully about its next few days, and then hung up before Gloria could respond. She sat with the phone in her hand for a moment. Then she called Marcus. He didn't answer. He was already in the car. Tyler was driving. He was 28, lean, with his father's eyes and considerably less patience. He drove with one hand and kept glancing at his phone on the seat beside him, even though he knew better. The city moved past the windows in its normal morning way. Buses and delivery trucks and people walking with coffee cups. All of it proceeding at its usual pace, indifferent to the particular crisis contained inside one moving vehicle. They pulled the grant page, Tyler said. The city website. The community center's grant page is gone. It was there last night. Marcus looked straight ahead. When did you check last night? 11, before the clip went up. Marcus said nothing. He watched the street. A school bus ahead of them stopped, and its yellow lights began to flash, and Tyler slowed, and they sat waiting as children crossed in front of them. Backpacks and sneakers, and someone's untied shoelace dragging on the asphalt. It means they moved fast, Marcus said. On the other side of the city, in an office building with a view of the harbor, a man named Garrett Sims was on his third call of the morning. Sims was a public relations director for the police union, 44 years old, good at his job in the specific way that people are good at jobs that require them to care more about narrative than outcome. He was standing at his window with his jacket still on, speaking in the measured tone of a man who has handled mornings like this before and knows which levers to pull and in what order. He was explaining to someone that the story needed a second layer, that the first clip was useful but not sufficient, that what they needed now was context about Marcus Dillard specifically, about who he was, about things in his past that could be surfaced without appearing to be surfaced. He used the phrase organic discovery twice. He spoke about the community center grant with the specific interest of a man who had already identified it as a pressure point. The call lasted 7 minutes. When it ended, he stood at the window and looked at the harbor for a moment. Then he sat down and began to type. At the Meridian Bar, Connie arrived at 10 to find a notice taped to the door. It was from the city. A scheduled inspection, compliance review, liquor license verification, dated that morning. She stood on the sidewalk and read it twice. She had owned the bar for 19 years and had never received an unscheduled inspection notice taped to her door before business hours. She folded it carefully. She put it in her coat pocket. She unlocked the door and went inside and stood behind the counter in the empty bar for a long time before she turned on any lights. The man in the gray jacket who had started the clapping was named Ernest Webb. He was 63, retired, and he had walked home the night before feeling something he hadn't felt in a while, a low-level electricity that came from having witnessed something true. He had not posted anything online. He had not called anyone. He had gone home and eaten a late dinner and gone to sleep. But at 10 a.m. he was sitting at his kitchen table, looking at the clip on his daughter's laptop, and he was watching the 17 seconds, and he was very still. Because he had been in that bar, and those 17 seconds were not what he remembered. He remembered more. He remembered everything that came before. And he was thinking now, carefully, and with the particular focus of a man who has decided something, about whether he still had the phone he'd been holding in his jacket pocket all evening. The phone he had never quite put away. Tyler spread everything on the kitchen table at 11 a.m., not metaphorically. Physically, printed pages, screenshots. A legal pad with handwriting that got smaller and tighter toward the bottom of each page the way handwriting does when the mind is moving faster than the hand. He had been at it since 7. The coffee maker had run twice, and the second pot was already half gone, and it was not yet noon. Marcus sat across from him and did not touch anything on the table. He watched Tyler work the way you watch someone do something they are genuinely good at, with a kind of quiet attention that is its own form of respect. The clip was posted at 11:47. Tyler said, "From an account created October of last year, 11 followers before last night. This morning it has 40,000. He tapped the printed screenshot with one finger. 11 followers don't produce 4,000 views in 13 minutes. That's not how it moves. Something pushed it. Marcus said nothing. The 3 accounts that retweeted it in the first hour. Tyler continued. I can't get into them, but I can see the pattern. They all retweeted the same 3 stories in the last 6 months. Different topics, different cities, same pattern, same timing intervals. He circled something on the legal pad. Somebody manages these. They're not bots exactly, but they're not organic either. He looked up at his father. Marcus was looking at the table. The clip itself, Tyler said. 17 seconds. I've watched it 40 times. It starts mid-motion. Marcus, your hand is already up in the first frame. The push doesn't exist in this version. The bourbon doesn't exist. The badge on the bar doesn't exist. He paused. Somebody cut the first 90 seconds minimum. Maybe more. How many people had phones out? Marcus said. Tyler sat back. He had been waiting for that question. I counted 5 visible phones in the clip itself, people in the background. The clip we have came from one of them, which means there are potentially 4 others. He looked at the legal pad. One of them caught the whole thing. Has to. The angle in the clip we have, it's from the right side of the bar, near the door. But you were sitting at the far left end. Somebody closer would have had a better angle, a fuller angle. Marcus looked at him steadily. Connie? Connie's bar has a security camera, Tyler said. He said it the way you say something you have been building toward for several minutes. Flat and careful, like setting something fragile on a table. External facing, above the door, and one internal according to the permit filing from 2019 when she upgraded the system. I pulled the permit. It's a 4-channel DVR system, standard 48-hour loop unless manually saved. He looked at his father. That was last night, Marcus said. That was less than 12 hours ago, Tyler said. If nobody touched that system, the footage is still there. Marcus stood up slowly. He walked to the kitchen window and looked out at the street. A woman was walking a dog past the house, moving at the dog's pace, which was slow and investigative. She didn't look up. The street looked like any other morning. They sent an inspection notice to Connie this morning, Marcus said, taped to the door before she arrived. Tyler was quiet for a moment. That's not about the liquor license. No, Marcus said. It's not. He turned from the window. His face had the quality it had in the bar, controlled and still. But there was something else in it now, something that had not been there last night. Not anger. More like the expression of a man who has done a calculation and arrived at a number he already suspected but needed to confirm. Tyler pulled a fresh page from the legal pad. He wrote a name at the top. Ernest Webb. Below it, he wrote gray jacket. Back table. Started clapping. Did not post anything. He underlined the last part twice. He had found no posts, no tweets, no comments from anyone matching that description, which meant either the man had no social media presence, which was possible, or he had chosen deliberately not to engage publicly, which was more interesting. He was there the whole time, Tyler said. He saw everything, and he stayed quiet. He looked up. People who stay quiet after something like this are either scared or they're waiting. Or both, Marcus said. Tyler wrote something else on the page and then stopped writing and looked at it. Then he turned the legal pad around and pushed it across the table toward his father. He had written a single line at the bottom, underlined once. The way you underline something that changes the direction of everything above it. It said he never put his phone away. The summons arrived at 2 p.m., a courier, not a patrol car, which was its own kind of message. The envelope was standard, official, the kind of envelope that has been used for this purpose for so long that its shape alone produces a specific feeling in the chest. Marcus signed for it at the door and brought it to the kitchen table and opened it without hurrying. Tyler watched him read it. Marcus's expression did not change. Assault on a peace officer, Marcus said. Formal charge, arraignment Friday morning. Tyler took the papers. He read them slowly. The way you read something when you are looking for the specific words that will tell you how bad it is. His jaw tightened once, near the bottom of the second page. He set the papers down parallel to the edge of the table. They moved fast, he said. Charges this fast means someone made a call before the report was even filed. I know, Marcus said. At 2:30 p.m. Connie called. Her voice was steady but had the quality of steadiness that costs something to maintain. She said 2 men had come into the bar an hour ago, not uniforms. Plain clothes. They had identified themselves as city compliance officers and asked to see the security system. She had let them in because she didn't know she had the right to refuse without a specific warrant, and by the time she thought to ask, they had already been in the back room for 11 minutes. The internal camera, Tyler said, when Marcus relayed this to him. She says the DVR is still there. They didn't take anything. Just looked. Marcus paused. She says one of them wrote something down. She couldn't see what. Tyler understood what writing something down meant. It meant they knew the footage existed. It meant they knew the timeline. It meant the next step would not be 2 men with clipboards. It would be something with more authority and less time for Connie to think about what she was agreeing to. She needs to pull that footage right now, Tyler said. Copy it. Drive. Cloud. Anything. Right now. Marcus was already dialing her back. At 3 p.m., a woman from the city's grants administration office called Gloria at the community center. The woman's voice was professional and neutral. The voice of someone reading from a prepared script while trying to sound like they weren't. She said there had been questions raised about the center's compliance with the terms of its operating grant. She said a review had been initiated. She said programming could continue for now, but that the center should expect a formal audit within the week and should prepare documentation going back 36 months. Gloria wrote everything down. She thanked the woman. She hung up and sat at her desk with her notepad in front of her and stared at the word audit for a long time. 36 months of documentation meant staff hours, legal fees, disruption. It meant parents asking questions. It meant the after-school program that served 64 kids would be operating under a question mark for however long a question mark served its purpose. It was not a coincidence, and Gloria knew it was not a coincidence, and whoever made that call knew that Gloria knew. And none of that changed anything. At 4 p.m., Tyler got a call from a lawyer named Sandra Osei, who said she had seen the news and wanted to help. She was 39, civil rights practice, 8 years, the kind of lawyer whose name appeared in certain circles when certain things happened. Tyler took down her number. He was cautious the way you are cautious when good things arrive quickly, examining them for the shape of something else. He called her back in 12 minutes. She answered on the first ring. They talked for 22 minutes, and by the end, Tyler had relaxed his grip on the phone slightly. He walked into the kitchen where Marcus was standing at the window again. She's real, Tyler said. And she says if we have footage, we need it before Friday morning. Arraignment is the moment. If we walk in there with clean evidence, we control the narrative from the first public proceeding. If we walk in without it, we're already playing from behind. Marcus looked at the street. Ernest Webb, he said. I've been trying to find a number since this morning, Tyler said. No listed phone. I have an address. He paused. It's 12 minutes from here. Marcus said nothing for a moment. Outside, a car had slowed near the house again, this time stopping briefly before moving on. It was a different car than this morning, but Marcus had been watching the street long enough to notice that 2 different cars slowing at the same address in one day was not a pattern that meant nothing. They're watching the house, Marcus said. Tyler came to the window and looked. The street was empty now, ordinary. A man walking with grocery bags, a kid on a bicycle, the particular quiet of an afternoon that had been arranged to look like nothing was happening. "Then we don't go together," Tyler said. Marcus turned from the window. He picked up his jacket from the back of the chair. He checked the inside pocket, the one with the notebook, and it was there. He put the jacket on and buttoned one button. "Give me the address," he said. Ernest Webb lived in a ground-floor apartment on Cabrillo Street, 12 minutes from Marcus's house by car, and considerably longer on foot through the back streets Marcus used to avoid the vehicle that had been parked 2 houses down since mid-afternoon. The building was older, well-maintained, with a narrow concrete path to the front door and a ceramic pot of dead flowers someone had not gotten around to replacing. Marcus knocked at 5:20 p.m. The door opened after one knock. Ernest Webb was already standing there. He was a compact man, 63, gray at the temples, with the careful eyes of someone who had spent a career watching things closely. He was wearing the same gray jacket from the night before. He looked at Marcus for a moment without surprise, like a man who had been expecting a specific visitor and was confirming the identification. Then he stepped back from the door and held it open. Marcus came in. The apartment was neat and spare, a couch, a reading chair, a small table with 2 chairs. On the table was a phone plugged into a charger, and beside the phone was a folded piece of paper with an address written on it in careful block letters. Ernest had been sitting at that table when Marcus knocked. He had not been doing anything else, just sitting there with the phone and the address, waiting. "I didn't post anything," Ernest said. He sat back down at the table. "Didn't send it to anyone." "I know," Marcus said. "I wasn't sure who to give it to." He looked at the phone. "I've been sitting here since this morning trying to figure out the right way to do this. Whether there is a right way." He was quiet for a moment. "I've seen what happens when things like this go wrong." Marcus sat down across from him. He did not rush. He did not explain or persuade. He placed his hands on the table and he waited, the way he had been waiting since the night before, with the particular patience of a man who understands that some things cannot be forced and that forcing them ruins them. Ernest picked up the phone. He turned it over once in his hand. Then he slid it across the table. The video was already open. Marcus pressed play. It was 4 minutes and 11 seconds. Ernest had been sitting at the back corner table with an angle that took in the full length of the bar, and his phone was a newer model with a wide lens, and he had started recording at 9:16 p.m., 2 minutes after Callahan walked in, because Ernest Webb had seen enough in 63 years to know when something was about to happen in a room. The first 30 seconds showed Callahan moving through the bar, the badge case coming out of the jacket, the deliberate placement on the counter, then the room reorganizing itself around it, quietly, table by table, the tide going out. Then Callahan's hand on Marcus's shoulder. Then the word "don't," audible and clear. Then the first push. Then the second. Then the third. Then Marcus's hand coming up, palm out, the universal gesture of a man trying to stop something without becoming it. Then Callahan grabbing the jacket. Then 3 seconds of physics. Then Callahan on the floor. Then the single clap from the back of the room, which on the video you could see came from Ernest himself, his own hands visible at the bottom of the frame for just a moment before he steadied the phone again. Marcus watched it without expression. He watched it the way you watch something that confirms what you already know, but needed to exist outside your own memory. When it ended, he set the phone down. He looked at Ernest. "The arraignment is Friday morning," Marcus said. "I know," Ernest said. "I looked it up." At 6 p.m., Tyler was sitting in Sandra Osie's office with a copy of the video transferred to 3 separate drives and uploaded to 2 separate cloud accounts. Sandra watched it once all the way through without stopping. Then she watched the first 40 seconds again. Then she closed her laptop and was quiet for a moment in the specific way that lawyers are quiet when they are converting what they have just seen into what it means in a room with a judge. "This doesn't just defend the charge," she said. "This reverses the entire sequence." She looked at Tyler. "Every word in that report, every word. The video contradicts each one in order." Tyler said nothing. "Friday," Sandra said, and she was already reaching for her phone. The arraignment was at 9 a.m. in courtroom 7 of the Hall of Justice, a room that smelled of old wood and recycled air and the particular weight of accumulated decisions. Marcus sat at the defense table in a dark jacket, hands folded, and he looked the same as he had looked on the second stool from the wall at Meridian Bar, which was the same as he had looked every other moment since this began. Still. Present. Patient. Deputy Chief Hess was in the 4th row. Garrett Sims was not present but had sent someone whose job was to watch and report. Councilwoman Okafor was in the back, alone, without her assistant, which meant she had come to see for herself. Sandra stood and addressed the court, and she was precise and unhurried, and she used the word sequence 3 times. She submitted the video. She submitted the bar's security footage, which Connie had pulled and copied at 3:47 p.m. the previous afternoon. 40 minutes before 2 men with city credentials returned with a more specific request. She submitted the permit records for the security system. She submitted Ernest Webb's signed statement, which he had written himself in the same careful block letters as the address on the folded paper. The prosecution said very little. The specific quality of their silence was different from the silence at Meridian Bar. That silence had been Callahan's, working for him. This silence was working against everyone who had built the 17-second story, and they all knew it. And the knowing was visible in the way they held their papers and did not look at the gallery. The judge reviewed the footage in chambers. He was gone for 19 minutes. When he returned, he sat for a moment before speaking. The way judges sit when they are choosing words that will be on record. The charges were dismissed. The room did not clap. It was not that kind of room, but something moved through it anyway. A collective exhale, a shift in the weight of the air, the sound of people who had been holding something releasing it all at once. Marcus sat at the table and did not move for a moment. Then he picked up his phone, set it face down on the table. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and took out the dark notebook. He opened it to the last page he had written on, the morning after, at his kitchen table with the flat gray light coming through the window. He looked at what was written there. Then he took out a pen and drew one slow line through it, not crossing it out, closing it. He put the notebook back in his pocket and buttoned his jacket. One button, the same button as always, and he stood up. 3 weeks later, Marcus walked back into Meridian Bar. Same door, same low light, same smell of old wood and rye. He walked to the far end of the counter and sat down on the second stool from the wall. Connie set a glass in front of him without being asked. Not bourbon this time. Clean water. Ice. She didn't say anything. Neither did he. He placed his phone on the counter. Face down, he placed the dark notebook beside it. Then he picked up the glass and drank slowly, and looked at the space above the bottles where the light was dim and even. The bar moved around him the way bars move, quiet conversations. The sound of ice, someone paying a tab near the door. Nobody poured anything over his head. Some men use power to take up space, others use it to hold their ground and wait. Callahan was suspended pending review. The 17-second clip still exists. So does the 4-minute 11-second one. The stories we don't control are always the ones that tell the truth. Some details in this story reflect events that were never fully documented. The ones that matter rarely are,